when they get here. There we go. Okay. Good evening, everybody. And a very special good evening as we continue our Wednesdays with interviews with shluchim all around the world, bringing us the Rebbe's message and how it's being relayed in all different circumstances and places. So we have with us today, I'm very honored and glad to have with us, Rabbi Haskelevich, who is the rabbi at Penn, University of Pennsylvania. So Rabbi, first of all, thank you very much. Really appreciate you're joining us. We know everyone's just had a very busy Tishrei. School has just begun. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, hope you'll feel that way when we're done. So let's get started. How long have you been at Penn, and what is it that brought you to make this your life's work?
Sorry, what is it that brought me?
What brought you to that you should make your life's work to serve the student body at the University of Pennsylvania?
So I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, to two immigrant parents from Ukraine. And they found their ways to Chabad in different ways. Just to go back a few generations, they basically, in communist Russia, if you wanted to remain observant Jew, you had an affiliation with Chabad, or you found a way to escape the country, or you became a communist. Those were the options. There was no other. So that's how both sides of my family ended up with Chabad. I grew up in Crown Heights in an observant family, but of course, at a certain point, I needed to make that decision about, whether Judaism was my own. And being very close to the Rebbe in proximity was, I guess, made the chances better for me, but it was still a choice. And at a certain point, I can't say it was like, one moment where I saw something and became a vegetarian. Probably was gradual, but there were many steps. And one of those steps, I think, was when I was in a summer camp in Montreal. And one of the staff members, I think his name was Epstein.
Okay, I wasn't going to bring that up, but okay.
Yeah. And just the way he woke us up in the morning inspired me for the rest of my life. And jokes aside, I made a decision to, I wanted to dedicate my life, obviously, as from one of the things they teach you in Chabad is they take young boys and they teach them how to do sales. And they don't tell them to sell easy stuff. They tell them to sell hard stuff, get some guy in the middle of Manhattan to roll up his sleeve and put these traps on in the middle of the street. If you could sell that when you're 14 years old, you could probably be a good salesman. I don't know, maybe there's help from the neshama, but I have had some experiences. And so you ask, how long have I been here? We've been here for 21 years. And quite interestingly, when we got married, my wife and I, and we were living in Brooklyn, and the shluchim office, which was arranging to place us in different places, anyone who was interested to try to connect with existing infrastructure. There were a few things on the table. One was moving to Estonia. A few other interviews. There was one interview that I said, not worth my time, because I don't know anything about college campus and the life on college campus, and I can't see why I would be cut out for it. I didn't know the difference between a fraternity or a sorority. I mean, I'm not sure if I do now, but I guess the difference is that there are laws that regulate, the discriminatory laws that regulate that sororities can't have events, so they have to go to the guys or something like that. Anyway, long story short, 21 years ago, Rabbi Schmidt insisted that he wanted to meet with us, and we were sold that college campus was a good idea. And I'm still sold on it. I think working with young people is great. You have a chance to influence them. It has a lot of challenges, but I'm sure everybody else has their challenges.
So let's get a picture of what Jewish life is like at Penn. Approximately how many students in the general population, and rough number, how many Jewish students at Penn? Rough numbers.
So nobody really knows the real numbers. They've been throwing around numbers for a very long time. some people try to do studies by looking at certain sections of the population. There's somewhere probably between 3,000 to 6,000 Jews at Penn. And what people don't know about Philadelphia is that there's close to 300,000 Jews in the greater Philadelphia area. We're one of the top 10 cities in the world, but you wouldn't notice it in terms of like Jewish infrastructure. So Penn is a very Jewish place. And because of that, also you can fall through the cracks as a Jew. I've met many like people coming from places like the South, like Atlanta, where they were like, or somewhere where they were a minority Jew, and they came to Penn because they didn't want to be the only Jew in their school. But when they got here and surrounded with so many Jews, they actually did not engage in Jewish life. They would just take it for granted. Everyone's Jewish, so we don't do anything Jewish. It's like moving to certain parts of Tel Aviv because you wanted to move to be in a more Jewish place. But then again, the music is all from America.
So you've been there 21 years. Can you give us a sense of the change maybe in how students interact with Chabad? What is the tone? I mean, remember, the kids who are in school today weren't even born when you first started. So what can you share with us about the trajectory of college students from 20 years ago to today?
So I don't have a quick cutout answer for that. People ask me this kind of similar questions a lot. And I also say to them that, I'm only working with a segment of the population. I can only reach and meaningfully interact with a certain number of people, even if it's 200 people a year. Like I could reach a bunch of people, but doesn't mean I had, I get a good sense. So who says that the kind of people that gravitated towards us 20 years ago is the same population that's gravitating now? It certainly isn't. For example, there was a very large graduate student community around Chabad when I started out here. Actually, an Orthodox observant graduate student community, and entirely vanished. It's not here anymore. Now, either a few of them are living in Center City, or there's way less of them, or we don't even know. I do get some, but it's very different. So I've grown 21 years. I was almost the college age when I started with the students, and now I'm, like you said, I'm old enough to be their parent. Many of them. So who's to say that our interactions are, that I'm interacting with the same people in the same way, so that if I say the students changed, maybe it's really me that changed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's certainly a lot of changes. We have earbuds, for example. So just coming from Sukkot, right? Sukkot, I spend my time in a very central place on campus. I put up a sukkah and have food in there every day, a different thing on the menu. There's like a menu hanging outside the sukkah, and it's right where people walk back and forth to class. And I invite them in for a quick lulav shake, and I even leave the lulav there. And we have this thing. My kids come and help me. We have a little counter where bouncers use at the thing or events, and so one of my kids has this thing, and every time someone shakes the lulav, says a bracha, he presses the button. So we did 388 count this Sukkot, with one like stormy rainy day, which pretty much meant that we only got like maybe 4 people that day. I mean, we weren't sitting in the sukkah through the rain, but we had an event later in the tent, which very few people showed up to. But I'm sitting there right in the middle of the campus, and I'm trying to remember now what my point was. I don't know. I was trying to tell you something about
The change in the character of the
yeah,
people.
like there are people who have earbuds. You can't attract their attention. You can't even say hi, Chag Sameach. Would you like to shake the lulav? We have Facebook, social media, the different social medias. And I remember when Facebook started, it was a new thing. It was not. I mean, you all remember that, but
Mm-hmm.
the students cannot imagine there was a time before that.
So you're there on the campus 21 years, and of course, one major difference is what prompted us to begin this program is Corona, which of course shifted and changed everything. So first of all, let me ask you, what's it like now? Is it full back in school? Is it still Corona? Are people walking around with masks? And how did that change you, Chabad at Penn, strategically to reach students when they're now home?
So it's a good question. The answer is that as soon as Corona hit, I realized that there had to be a silver lining, and I had to, do, which is exactly what you're doing with this Zoom. And I tried to keep up with the people that I was studying with individually, and some of those people drew in their entire families. So if I was learning with Jonathan, now Jonathan's dad and his mom and his sister and his grandmother zoomed in, and we had like our weekly. And these are people I would have never met because they live in Florida. So, and I tried to do as much as I could with that. There were other things that we tried there were some students around, and we tried to like cater their Pesach meals so they can come and pick it up. And we did Shabbos meals in a box that students picked up. And the truth is, there was a time it was hard, like people were afraid to go get food, or things were off the shelves right in the beginning. But then afterwards, it wasn't so much about providing food or even kosher food, because there was nothing else, but it was providing a message that someone cares. So in the beginning, you weren't even supposed to stay on the porch when they came to pick up the food, even 6 feet away, because that was too much. And the university was like monitoring what everybody was doing, or like telling us, don't even be on the porch. But eventually I sat on the porch and people came by, and they expressed that they just felt the love through the food, that there's somebody that cared about them to make them a home cooked meal. So that they weren't really coming for the food. And then sometimes we would chat for an hour, socially distanced outdoor chat. Then eventually school came back last year, actually. It came back, but it didn't come back. They told the students we're having in person, and then 2 weeks before they did an about face. So many students came anyway. They had their apartments and they just were on Zoom. So we worked with the rules that the university originally set up, which eventually they weren't using. They had like 25 people per event, socially distanced outdoors. So we put up a big tent. I bought these little 2-foot tables, put them 6 feet apart, and had them all come and sit and interact with each other outdoors, and Shabbat dinners. And then when Sukkot came around, the place was mobbed. We made a bunch of sukkahs, large ones, had people sit inside, with lattices the air can go through. We did all these kind of things. And right now, when school is already in person officially, and even if you're vaccinated and you're required to be vaccinated or tested like twice a week or more, and you still have to wear masks indoors. But we are seeing a much bigger turnout than pre-corona, even though I would say now it's already post-corona. Even though you have to go to class with a mask on, I mean, students are not wearing masks at fraternity parties, and everybody spread whatever they spread already, at the time.
So one of the things
we're still seeing greater numbers. So I'm wondering why. I'm not 100% sure. I'm listening to other people's theories.
People are craving that social interaction, enough social distance. We hear a lot in the news about college campuses being very hostile to Israel, BDS, students, and so on. What's the tone like there? Is it welcoming to Jews? Is there anti-Semitism? Is there a big movement of against Israel? What's the tone in your university?
We have our share of anti-Israel people, professors, and things like that. I've met with some of them. I even had some of them at Chabad, not to promote their agenda, but for other Jewish purposes. They're Jewish. But this is not you don't hear about a lot of anti-Semitism and anti-Israel activities here. You have to also define, I guess, first J Street U. You guys familiar with J Street? J Street U was actually launched in our Hillel at Penn, in Penn Hillel on campus. So that caused a little bit of an uproar. So there is that kind of activity, but there's not so much of it. There isn't that much. I think the real issue is probably apathy, or not so much, people don't care so much
Not
about these
active.
topics.
So
Not
a
so
little advice. We have people here who have kids in college, or nephews or friends who have kids. And a lot of people, they send their kids off to college and they know that the kids are interested in their grades or interested maybe in the parties. What can parents do? What would you recommend to a parent or an uncle or a neighbor, whatever it is, who's sending a son or daughter at 17, 18 years old off to university? How can the parents help the Chabad on campus to have the kids get more involved? What would you recommend that parents can do to help their kids get more involved?
I think it's a very individual question. Well, first of all, you have to raise them meaningfully interested in Judaism, where you have to try your best, so that
Too late
that
for
helps,
that.
right? But another thing you could do is you could get chocolates and ask your child to go deliver it to the Chabad.
Brilliant.
Or when you drop them off, you set up a meeting to physically go to the Chabad house with your child. Whether it's when you're checking out the school, you set up a meeting with the Chabad house, with the Rebbitzin or the rabbi. You make sure they have the contact information. You check in with them. Try to sponsor a Shabbat dinner in honor of the birthday of your child. So this way they'll have to go at least then and bring their friends maybe. You don't have to sponsor the whole dinner, but at least some of it. But this way it creates, I mean, obviously you could also speak to the shliach and a shluch. I mean, you have to ask yourself what it is about. If this is a person, if your child is interested in getting involved and just hasn't found the way, or is it, usually when parents call me, it's not a good sign.
Yeah.
Right? It means it's not going to be easy, but sometimes it is. It really depends. Tell the shluchim what your son or daughter likes to do. Did they volunteer? Do they love volunteering with like special needs children? Do they like to cook? Do they like to study Talmud? Maybe maybe they can set up a learning session. Maybe they can volunteer and be in charge of something that the Chabad house wasn't offering yet, but they're very passionate about maybe Holocaust, and they'll be in charge of setting up an event with a Holocaust survivor. They should be involved. There should be some kind of maybe not everyone wants to have a leadership position, but they can help out. They can try to share what it is about your child that it could be a way, an avenue, so they get better get to know them. But I think bringing them through the door is definitely. Sometimes it takes a month or 2 or 3 to get them through the door, and
Okay,
doesn't hurt to check in frequently, call them every month or 2 just to say good Shabbos to the rabbi and Rebbitzin. And it does the work, because every campus is different, but I have so many people on my radar, and it's hard to, but if someone's parent is calling me, it just does the work. It's, it helps you prioritize.
Great. Okay, Rabbi, we want to thank you so much for joining us. Maybe you send us home with one quick story, maybe a favorite story about something that's happened at Penn, Chabad at Penn. Maybe you could share just something, give us a little taste.
I have a lot of favorite stories, and I don't remember any of them. But I keep telling one of the students, you should be my scribe and write all my, when I sit late night in the sukkah with a student and we start like reminiscing about this student that came through and that student that came through. This is not one of my favorite stories necessarily, but I'll share it anyway because it popped into my head. I had a student that came by and started learning with us, and he grew up in a Reform household. The Reform rabbi told him that he'll probably become a rabbi one day, and it probably will happen at some point. But this kid started becoming more interested in observance when he came to Penn, and it didn't start with Chabad, but very quickly he went to check out Chabad. And then he turned to me probably a semester later and said to me, Rabbi, I'm so glad that I didn't meet you first. I said, why? he says, because I met some other rabbis, they told me that if I practice Judaism and I study Torah, my life is going to be well balanced. I'm going to be more successful. I'm going to be happier. I'm going to be a better parent. All these great things are going to happen. It really appealed to me. And that's why I started getting more interested. But when I started learning with you, you just keep saying it's not about you, it's about God. You have to love God selflessly. It's not about trying to, it's not what you get out of it. It's don't ask what God can do for you or what Judaism can do for you, but what you were created for and so he says, I wouldn't have been ready to hear that message in the beginning. So I probably would have been turned off. I'm so glad that I heard them first, but now I can take your message and internalize it.
Beautiful. Well, Rabbi, I want to thank you. Really appreciate it. And yes, Rabbi Haskelevich was my camper once upon a time, back in the day, a few gray hairs ago and probably 30 pounds ago. And
I think I'm catching up to you.
So thank you. Continue that tzlacha in your holy, holy work, bringing the message of Hashem and the Rebbe's love for every Jew to the students at Penn. Tomorrow night, everybody, we'll learn some Parsha. We'll see you then at 9:00. I'll send out the recording. Thank you again, Rabbi. Really, really appreciate it. Good night, good night, good night.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Okay.
Good night.
Bye-bye.